Hi guys, this is Zaahida from liveinspire.co.za and I am a BodyTalk practitioner and emotional intelligence and life coach. And this video that I'm doing for you guys today has probably been the most requested one. So many of you have sent me messages and asked me to do a video on the books that I find most helpful and have been most inspiring and educational for me on my journey. So today I am doing exactly that. And before I get into the actual books, into the titles and why I found them helpful, I just want to give you a little bit of insight on where you can actually purchase the books. So if you are local, if you are here in Durban, South Africa, then I highly recommend a company called Sherwood Books. I will put the link in the description box below to all of the different providers, and I'll leave their Instagram handle here as well. I have found them to be so helpful because of my work particularly. I often read books that are a little bit outside the box and not so mainstream, and they always manage to find me the obscure titles that I sometimes give them. So they always help me out. They're really efficient and they're really affordable as well. So if you're local, please do go with them. They're very helpful. If you're not local, then I would suggest try your local bookstores, try Take-A-Lot. They have a lot of different books as well, a lot of titles, and you are absolutely certain to get them at Amazon. I'll leave the link in the description box below as well. They have all the titles that I'm going to be speaking about. I just realized that my glasses are causing a lot of reflection, so you guys probably won't be able to see into my eyes properly. So I've taken them off just to make it easier for you guys. The first book that I'm going to introduce to you guys is one that you might have been already exposed to if you're familiar with the whole positive thinking kind of lifestyle, and it's an absolute classic. It's by an author by the name of Louise Hay, and in fact I find all of her books very helpful. And the name of the book is You Can Heal Your Life. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the book here today because I've actually lent it out to one of my clients and it hasn't yet been returned. But You Can Heal Your Life is such an amazing book to start out with. If you're just getting into the mind-body connection, if you're just starting to get familiar with how your thoughts and your emotions end up affecting you physically and could possibly be contributing to some of the physical symptoms that you're experiencing in your life. What I love about these books is they're such good introductory books, but they're also books for even if you are on you're quite a long way on your journey, it can even still be very, very helpful because it's such a nice reminder. So they're very simply written, but very powerful in the way that she goes ahead and explains the different aspects of the mind-body connection. It's not highly scientific, but she uses a lot of real-world examples. She also uses examples from her own life. Louise Hay has passed away recently, but her books have been bestsellers for decades now. And she's founded a publishing house, Hay House, that pushes out some very inspirational titles as well. So You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay is an absolute must-read if you want to know more about the mind-body connection and how your emotions and your thoughts end up affecting you physically. In her book, Louise Hay also explains how affirmations work and how affirmations can actually help you to overcome some of the issues that you have in your life. She explains how to use them. She gives lots of examples of different affirmations that you could use and implement in your life. And having used it personally as well as recommended to the clients, I can vouch for that affirmations can be extremely helpful, especially during a time of transition and change where you're trying to overcome certain limiting aspects in your life, where you're trying to create big change in your physical or your emotional well-being or both. The affirmations are very helpful, and she gives you a lot of tools with regards to that. So the second title that I'm going to recommend is one that I read many years ago. Unfortunately, I don't have a physical copy with me today because it is on my Kindle. But it's a book that I read many years ago that was extremely influential on me. And I highly, highly recommend this book. It's called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. Now, Brene Brown is a researcher. She's a qualitative researcher. And what I love about her books is that it's not just her own stuff that she's spouting out. It's based on the research. So the suggestions that she's giving you is based on solid research that she has conducted herself. If you're just getting into the field of self-development and learning more about self-love and what it means to have more self-worth and how that actually affects our relationships and the ability to which we are able to create the life that we want, you'll know that self-worth and self-love and self-acceptance are big buzzwords and they play a huge role in all of these different aspects that I've mentioned. But how to actually get to the nitty-gritty of it, how to actually break it down, how do you develop self-worth, how do you develop self-acceptance? So this is the book that's going to help break it down for you. She researched people who seem to have a very strong sense of groundedness in them and strong sense of self-worth. And she broke it down into little bite-sized pieces of what kind of attributes they displayed in their lives, how they approached their lives, what kind of perspectives they had. And she shares how you can incorporate some of that into your own life. This book is absolutely amazing for anyone who struggles with self-worth issues, struggles with issues of not feeling enough, confidence issues, self-esteem issues, relationships issues. It's going to give you so much insight into yourself and where you might be struggling. And we know now that self-awareness is a huge part of creating change and positive transformation in any aspect of your life, be it professional or personal. So that's Brene Brown's Gifts of Imperfection is an absolute must read if you want to go further into your self-development journey and learn what kind of attributes are needed in order to develop self-worth, what you need to let go of in order for self-worth to emerge. Since we are on the topic of Brene Brown, I think she's such a wonderful author, then I'm going to suggest also her next title after the Gifts of Imperfection, which is Rising Strong. Now, Rising Strong is almost a follow-on from the Gifts of Imperfection, because once you start implementing some of the advice that Gifts of Imperfection gives, some of the protocols and the tools that the Gifts of Imperfection suggests, it's about living more open-heartedly. It's about taking risks. It's about going ahead in your life. This book is about how to get back up, how to deal with the challenges and how to deal with the failures that life sometimes throws at us. It's also a very helpful book that will help you understand yourself in relation to other people. I know boundaries is something that people struggle with. People have this conception of boundaries that it means placing a wall between you and other people, that it's actually going to inhibit connection, when nothing could be further from the truth. Having healthy boundaries in a relationship actually helps you to connect from a deeper, more centered space, and it helps you to connect more authentically to the people that you care about. And this is a really helpful book that helps you understand what boundaries are about, what kinds of things to look out for in terms of trusting people, and really how to navigate the sometimes very tricky landscape of relationships and how to bring your own self-awareness into that in order to improve your relationships. So I swear I'm not being sponsored by Brene Brown. My third title is her third and most recent book, which is Brene Brown's Braving the Wilderness. And it says here, the quest for true belonging and the courage to stand alone. And that sounds a little bit scary because it actually is. This book is not a beginner's reader in terms of self-development. If you have already read the other titles, if you've been deep in your self-development work for many years, then this is a book that you want to attempt. So it's not something I would introduce on the get-go, but it is a fantastic book. It's really a book about going into the depths of your own self-awareness and your own self-acceptance so that you can bring forth the courage that exists within all of us to be the best version of ourselves. And it sits at the back here. True belonging doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. So it's very much about coming back to who you really are and living authentically, which is what being the best version of yourself for me really is. And it says here, a timely and important new book that challenges everything we think we know about cultivating true belonging in our communities, organizations, and culture. So this is a little bit of a more advanced kind of book, but again, absolutely amazing if you feel drawn to it, but not something that I would start out with. So the next book that I found extremely helpful on my own journey, and I've recommended this to quite a few clients along the way as well, it's a book called The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, right? And it's a bit of a classic in terms of the self-development field. So the 4 Agreements is 4 agreements basically, right? And the 4 agreements specifically are, number 1, be impeccable with your word. So speaking with integrity, understanding the power of your words and the effect that has in your life. So I mentioned the Louis Hay book earlier on, And that book is very much about how the things that we speak actually influence our lives, the choice of words that we make and how that influences the way that we feel, and how that influences our perspective in life. This kind of ties in with all of that. So being impeccable with your word is about being aware of the power that your words, your choice of words has on yourself and on other people in terms of your relationships and so on. And about not gossiping as well. Okay, and we know about that because I've got a video on that. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it above here. The second agreement is don't take anything personally. And that's a big one because you think, well, how can I not take certain things personally, especially because it's directed at me? The book explains how we all live from our own projections. So we have our internal landscape, our internal belief systems and thought patterns and so on that create a certain perspective that we might be projecting onto others. So the way that we interpret other people's words or actions is very much about how our projections are framed. And likewise, other people also project their stuff onto us and sometimes misinterpret what we say and do. So when you understand this, it becomes a little bit easier not to take things personally, because then you understand people are just coming from their level of understanding. And at the same time, it's a little bit easier to be easier with other people, to be less hard on them and less judgmental of them, because you also realize that you might be also projecting your own stuff onto them. So that's the second part. And I'm just giving you a little bit of overview into these four agreements. The book obviously goes much more in depth. The third agreement is don't make assumptions. And I absolutely love that one because, again, we make so many assumptions based on our own frameworks, on our own mental frameworks, and our own perceptions and our past situations, that sometimes when people are saying and doing things, we end up misinterpreting and misunderstanding and overreacting to a situation because we're making assumptions. So it's always best to ask questions. And again, don't take anything personally as well. And then the fourth one is always do your best. But in today's time where we're told to do more and strive and hustle and grow and all of these things, which are good aspirations to have, this is an understanding that doing your best is not about perfectionism, something that's covered in the gifts of imperfection that I mentioned earlier as well. But doing your best in the moment is about being in your integrity in the moment and understanding the ebb and flow of your own mental and physical energy. So this book, an absolute must read, I feel, if you want to understand yourself and understand other people better and create better relationships, absolute must read. The next book that I'm going to be sharing with you guys is a personal favorite. I read a lot of different types of books for work purposes, and I often use highlighters to highlight certain passages that I want to refer back to later on. And this particular book, probably I should highlight the entire thing because there's just like truth bombs all over the show. This book just speaks to my heart. And I remember the first time I started reading it, I actually teared up because it just was so resonant with me. And it really hit something deep within me. And the title of the book is The Conscious Parent. And I've spoken about this on my Instagram before, The Conscious Parent by Dr. Shefali Sabri. So she is a clinical psychologist that specializes in parenting issues. What I love about this book is that unlike a lot of parenting books out there, it's not a how-to. It's not a prescriptive kind of approach where do this and implement these kind of strategies. Because the problem with that is, as you and I know, when you have children, and even if you have a few, you have 2 or 3 or 4 children, that the same types of strategies don't work with every child. Every child needs a different kind of approach. And as a parent, that's really challenging sometimes because it means you have to kind of go back and forth and figure your way out with each child. This comes from a completely different perspective. This book proposes that the challenges that we have with our children and the ways in which they trigger us emotionally have more to do with our own unresolved baggage, with our own past traumas or our past conditioning, our own inadequacies, our own fears and doubts, and our children end up mirroring this back to us. So a lot of what we see in our children that we need to fix is at least partially some of our own growth. And the more that we grow as individuals, the more that we shift and heal on our own past issues, our own traumas, our own inadequacies and fears, the more we are able to bring a more evolved version of ourselves to our parenting and understand our children better and be able to respond to them more authentically. And so she proposes that our children are actually our awakeners. Our children are actually our teachers in a lot of ways. And if you've been a parent for a while, then I think we can all resonate with that our children do sometimes teach us lessons that we maybe don't always want to learn. But this book is absolutely wonderful. She draws from a lot of she draws from a lot of her own personal clients and their experiences, and she gives a lot of case studies in terms of that, different issues they've had across the board. So dealing with toddlers right across the board to if you've got older children, teenagers, young adults, and so on. I absolutely love this book. It's such a must read, and it's the kind of book that you can go back to as often as you like. So you don't necessarily have to read it from beginning to end, but you can always go and read a couple of pages at a time. And so it might take you a few months or even a year to finish this book, but well worth it. If you're a parent, or if you've even been thinking about having children, this is an absolute must read, and I think it will be so helpful to you. To be completely honest, the next book that I want to recommend is one I'm not entirely sure whether or not I should let you guys know about it. And the reason for that is it's such a trigger point for so many people, right? We live in a society where we're told to look up to our parents and to respect our parents and honor them and obey them. And yes, we should respect and honor our parents by all means. They have done the absolute best they could possibly do for us, and they love us unequivocally. However, there's a shadow version of this entire issue that I feel is not spoken about enough, but it affects people and they carry shame around it because we live in a society that doesn't allow us to speak about this. And this is the issue of people who have been through traumatic childhoods in terms of abuse, in terms of narcissistic, being brought up by people who may have had narcissistic tendencies or personality disorders. That yes, they are still parents and they deserve honor and respect and love, but sometimes people who have grown up in this environment, it has left them scarred. It affects their current life situations and relationships. And at the same time, they have no idea how to have a healthy relationship with that particular parent because there's still so much emotional baggage. There's still so much confusion and doubt and trauma around their childhood and around their parenting and their relationship with their parents. So this is really a book for someone who has been through that, or if you are married to someone who has been through a difficult or traumatic childhood. And the name of the book is called Toxic Parents, and again a very trigger kind of title. And by no means am I talking about the general things. You know, all parents do the absolute best that they can do. As a parent myself, it's not an easy task by any measure, but we have to take cognizance of the fact that sometimes there may have been people who have mental issues, who have personality disorders, certain tendencies, certain abusive tendencies, that had children, and those children now have to go forth into the world. And how do they then recover from their childhood and create healthy relationships? And how do they then learn to parent their own children without bringing some of the baggage of their past? And this book is really helpful for that. So it's called Toxic Parents, Overcoming their Hurtful Legacy and Reclaiming Your Life. It's by Dr. Susan Forward. And again, she's a practitioner who works with clients, so she gives a lot of case studies of different clients who have grappled with the same issue. And what I like about this book is it will help people who have been through a similar situation to understand that they're not alone, that there are people who struggle with this, and that it can be overcome and it doesn't have to rule your present life. And at the same time, it gives you avenues and practical tools in terms of letting go of some of your past issues, of moving towards the process of forgiveness, and being able to establish a kind of relationship or understanding and deal with the parent, if that parent is still in your life, to deal with them from a more constructive and less angry or less hurt perspective. So you can actually bring a more mature perspective to that relationship with that parent, and also it will help you immeasurably in your own parenting and in your relationship with your spouse, because very often the wounds that we bring from childhood start to show up in our marriages and in our own parenting. So this book is quite an invaluable one if you have struggled with some of this. Although I will highly recommend that you work with a practitioner, whether it's a life coach, BodyTalk practitioner, a therapist of some sort, in order to overcome that, because a lot of that lays within the subconscious. But this is going to give you such an understanding into how the process of healing with regards to this works. So it's one that I highly recommend if you have ever been through something similar. So that's basically it for now. These are some of the books that I suggest that I found helpful in my own journey, and I think that you might benefit from as well if you want to continue down your own healing and self-development journey. I hope that you found this helpful. Have you read any of the titles? Do you think you might read any of the titles that I've suggested? If yes, please do leave a comment below and let me know what you thought of these different books. If you've read it, what has been your opinion? If there's any that you're thinking about reading now that you've watched this video, let me know which book actually appeals to you the most. And if you have any questions around the books, I would be happy to answer them as well. If you liked this video, if you found it helpful, then please remember to share it with a friend or a loved one who you think could benefit. Remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that red subscribe button down below. It's completely free, so there's absolutely no reason you shouldn't subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video.